All right, today we are tackling one of the biggest, most mind-bending mysteries out there. It's a question that stumps scientists and philosophers alike. Why do we experience anything at all? I mean, really, think about it. So let's take something simple. You look at a bright red apple. Okay, we know what's happening in your brain, right? It's a storm of activity. Neurons are firing, light waves are being processed, memories are getting triggered, all that mechanical stuff. But what about the feeling of red? The actual subjective, in-your-head experience of seeing that color? Where does that come from? And that question right there is the core of what's known as the hard problem of consciousness. It's a really deep mystery. And you know what's kind of funny? The best way to actually wrap our heads around it is to start by looking at what it isn't. We've got to talk about the easy problems first.
Okay, so section 1, the easy problems. We're going to start by looking at what the hard problem isn't. And yeah, the term easy problems comes from the philosopher David Chalmers. But let's be clear, easy is a bit of a joke. These problems are incredibly complicated, but they're the kind of problems we think science can eventually solve.
So what are these so-called easy problems? Well, they're all about function. They're about what the brain does. Think of it like this. These are the problems you can tackle with the tools of cognitive science. You can map out neural circuits, you can build computer models, you can watch how people behave. The core question for all these easy problems is basically, how does the machine work? So for example, we're talking about stuff like, how do you focus your attention on one person's voice in a super loud, crowded room? You know, the cocktail party effect. Or how does your brain take all the information from your eyes and your ears and just seamlessly stitch it together into one coherent reality? Even something like telling the difference between being awake and being asleep, that's an easy problem. Now, again, they are mind-bogglingly complex puzzles, for sure, but they're puzzles neuroscience has the tools to chip away at. All right, so that brings us to section 2, the real hard problem. If all of that stuff is easy, what in the world makes the hard problems so, well, hard? To really get a gut feeling for this, we're going to walk through a really famous thought experiment. Okay, this is called the Mary's Room experiment. Picture this. There's this neuroscientist named Mary, and she is an absolute genius. She knows literally every single physical fact there is to know about color vision. The physics of light, the neurobiology of the eye and brain, everything. But here's the catch. She's lived her entire life in a room that's completely black and white. She's only ever read about color in black and white books, so she knows exactly what happens in your brain when you see the color red, but she's never seen it herself. Then one day, the door opens, and she steps out into the world for the first time. Someone hands her a red apple. And here's the million-dollar question. Does Mary learn something new? Remember, she already knew all the physical facts. There's nothing more to learn on that front. But does she learn what it's like to actually see red? Is there some new piece of knowledge she gains from the experience itself? This whole idea of what it's like is perfectly captured by the philosopher Thomas Nagel. He famously said, there is something it is like to be a conscious organism. I mean, that's really the heart of it, isn't it? There's something it's like to be you, right now, listening to this. There's something it's like to be a bat, flying around. It's that first-person, subjective quality of life. And, of course, philosophers have a fancy word for this. It's called qualia. Qualia are those individual, raw feelings of experience, the what-it's-likeness, the actual redness of red, the sound of a middle C on a piano, the sharp sting of a paper cut. It's not the brain process causing the pain, it's the feeling of pain itself. And there you have it. That's the hard problem in a nutshell. The question isn't how your brain processes the light waves from a red apple. We can figure that out. The question is why. Why is all that complicated, physical, neural processing accompanied by a subjective, private, inner experience of redness? Why isn't it all just information processing in the dark? Why does it feel like anything to be alive? Okay, section 3, an illusion of experience. This is where things get really controversial, because this question has sparked a huge debate. And one of the most radical ideas out there is, what if this whole subjective experience thing, this feeling that seems so real to us, is just an illusion? So the debate really boils down to two big camps. On one side, you have people who say, look, experience is the most real thing there is. You're experiencing something right now. How can you doubt it? But then you have the other side with philosophers like Daniel Dennett, who argue that what we call experience is really just a kind of user illusion, a clever trick our brain pulls on itself to help us get by. This is a great way to think about that illusionist view. The idea here is that there's no little you inside your head, no captain at the helm of the ship.
Instead, your brain is just this chaotic battle of different processes, and whichever process wins at any given moment gets to steer the ship. And it generates this story that there's a conscious self in charge. The experience isn't happening in real time. It's the narrative your brain writes after the fact.
But the pushback on this is pretty strong, and it goes something like this quote suggests. Okay, fine. Let's say it's an illusion, but an illusion is still an experience of an illusion. You see the problem? It doesn't actually get rid of the experience. In order to even doubt that you are having an experience, you have to, well, be having an experience of doubting. It kind of feels like you're trying to pull the rug out from under your own feet. Yeah, the big critique here is that calling it an illusion is just a philosophical sleight of hand. It doesn't actually solve the hard problem, it just relabels it. You still have to explain why we have the illusion of experience. It's like this great summary of the problem, saying appearances aren't really real, they just appear to appear. You haven't explained anything, you've just kicked the can down the road. Okay, section 4, why this question matters. Because you might be thinking, this is all just a fun, abstract puzzle, right? Well, not really. The answer to this question could have massive, real-world consequences, especially when we start talking about AI. I mean, just think about it. We are building AIs right now that can talk to us, write poetry, make art. They can act just like a human. But the big question is there anyone home? Is there something it is like to be that AI, or is it just an incredibly complex puppet, perfectly mimicking emotions and understanding, but with absolutely nothing going on inside? This gets us to another creepy and cool thought experiment, the philosophical zombie, or P-zombie. And no, we're not talking about the brain-eating kind. A P-zombie is a hypothetical being that is physically identical to a person in every single way. It walks like you, talks like you, reacts to pain like you, but on the inside, it's completely empty. There's no inner life, no qualia, no experience at all. The lights are on, but absolutely nobody is home. And the zombie really highlights the problem with AI. If we create an AI that says, I love you, or that sunset is beautiful, how could we ever prove that it's actually feeling something? From the outside, it's completely indistinguishable from a conscious being. Suddenly, the hard problem isn't just philosophy. It's about AI rights. It's about ethics. It's about whether we can ever really know if we're not the only conscious beings in the room. So let's just quickly recap the whole shebang. The easy problems are all about the brain's functions, the how it works stuff. The hard problem, though, is the deep mystery of subjective experience itself, why we have qualia. This has sparked this huge debate over whether our inner world is real or just a really convincing illusion. And as we've seen, this isn't just academic talk. It has massive implications for the future of AI and even how we think about ourselves. And that leaves us with one final brain-melting question to chew on. Is your experience just something your brain cooks up, like your stomach makes acid? Is it just a biological byproduct? Or is it possible that experience, that consciousness itself, is a fundamental feature of the universe, just like space or time? And maybe your brain is less of a generator and more of a receiver, an antenna, that's just tuning into a cosmic broadcast of consciousness. I mean, depending on the answer, it could completely change everything we think we know about, well, everything.